Alright, so picking between my top two films for my number two spot was probably the toughest thing in this whole series I've been doing, but I felt pretty confident ultimately in my choices. So at number two, I am placing Friday the 13th, Part 6, Jason Lives. Previous installments did already feel campy and comical in places, intentional or otherwise, but with Part 6, they feel like they truly embrace the absurdity of it all, which is pretty much a smart choice for a sixth installment to a slasher franchise. But the story follows Tommy Jarvis as he tries to end it all with Jason. Jason is dead and buried in a grave, but Tommy just wants to be sure. So he goes to set fire to his corpse. It's storming out, so he can't. And in a fit of rage, he grabs a metal, cross-like object and starts stabbing him over and over again. And of course, lightning strikes, and Jason is awake again. And despite this dumbass setup, I still love this film, even after this lazy idea for an intro. You kind of have to block out the realization that essentially all the deaths that happen are pretty much Tommy's fault in a way. Like, he of course didn't intend for this to happen, but he could have just left it alone, at least until it was a sunny day. But whatever. There's plenty of nice distractions that you can enjoy in this film, and it's still a decent film overall. And one of the first of those distractions is probably my favorite title card in the entire franchise, which is Jason walking across the screen horizontally, and then he turns suddenly and slashes at the camera. And of course, this is an intentional homage to the James Bond intros, so if that doesn't set the tone for this one, I don't know what will. And Tommy, with his mental health issues, sounds completely insane, going to the sheriff and trying to warn him about Jason and what's coming, so ultimately everybody has to figure it out for themselves. The notorious camp is back open, and this time we actually see children come to the camp. But that's okay though, because they changed the name. It is no longer Camp Crystal Lake, it is now Camp Forest Green. Camp Forest Green. Fuck the Pillsbury Doughboy and Cashmere Blankets, that shit is soft. I hate that fucking name. But anyway, I do love the more comedic vibe to this one. Jason at times also seems oddly confused and bewildered, even though he's experienced these things before. Such as during the business's paintball game, he kind of grabs a guy's arm who's holding a machete, and he slings the body away into a tree, but he ends up keeping the arm holding the machete. And he just kind of raises it up and examines it like he's suddenly surprised by his own strength. And then there's the sex scene in the RV. The couple is going so hard that it's rocking the RV back and forth. And Jason just walks onto the scene and just kind of, cocks his head to the side at the bizarre sight. Like he hasn't interrupted many sex scenes before, during, or after. But back to our leads, I did not ultimately feel too much for the relationship between Tommy and the sheriff's daughter Megan. They're fine and have some cool moments, but it's nothing super special. And Megan also has zero survival instincts with people apparently, because she takes one look at Tommy, this guy in a holding cell, and she even hears a little bit about his history, and she just automatically yeah, he's kind of attractive. I trust him with my life. And off they go. But I must say, the high-speed car chase scene was really cool in its intensity and the action that went along with it, but also really funny in a way. She holds Tommy's head down her lap to kind of hide him from the cops, but then she unknowingly recites these innuendos throughout, talking about a hairy turn she has to make, and then shouting things like, "Yeah, that's what I want," while his face is just buried so close to her crotch. The camp scenes are surprisingly not super interesting to me, at least not until everybody comes together for the finale. There's a couple okay kills with the counselors and some funny moments and quotes. Some nice exchanges between the kids and the counselors. For instance, I almost laughed out loud when Megan tells them the story of Jason and his mom and that legend. And one of the counselors pipes up and says that she thought of something scarier than that story. And she proceeds to point out the window to the approaching buses filled with children. And honestly, it's kind of a valid take. I would not be a camp counselor. Absolutely not. But the paintball scene might be my favorite, especially with the two grown men taking it super serious. Especially the one who had these glasses on that blew up his eyes like times 5 at least. He proceeds to take off in a dead sprint at one point and just trips and falls. It is the most cartoony thing ever, and I actually loved it here. Then the run-in they had with Jason was good overall, but I do kind of wish he didn't kill 3 of the 4 people in one machete swing. I just wish they had done a little bit more with this setting and these characters, but besides that, it's still a huge standout scene that I enjoyed. We even get a fourth wall break from Martin, the drunk who watches over the graveyard, who essentially insults us for having a strange idea of entertainment while referencing another moment in the movie. The incorporation of more 80s rock was also really fun. I didn't realize at first that a lot of it was Alice Cooper, but either way, it's still a really great, upbeat vibe. The kills as a whole, there were some interesting ones for sure, but again, not the best. Although, going back to the paintball scene, while I said the triple kill with the machete swing was a bit too fast for that scene, it's still not a bad kill in and of itself. But probably the biggest kill that caught me off guard and made me cringe every time I think about it is the sheriff kill, where the sheriff just gets folded easier than paper. It's just so abrupt and insane, and I actually really like that one. And the final showdown with Tommy and Megan versus Jason was fine, trapping him at the bottom of the lake with the chains. Some people take issue with some of the logistics of how it all plays out, particularly with the boat propeller attack, but it's Friday the 13th Part 6. When was logic ever a thing here? But still, it beats out a lot of the other finales. It's one of the more intense ones. It goes a bit bigger than some of the others, aside from maybe Part 7. So I enjoyed it. Tom McLoughlin is the writer and director here, and this is his only involvement with the franchise, but I really enjoyed his effort. I do feel bad kind of for Dan Bradley, who was supposed to play Jason, but was fired after one day for being a bit too bulky for them. But I am happy we got CJ Graham, who has a lot of fun with the role, utilizing his army history to compensate for his lack of stunt experience. And this film's lack of financial success makes me dislike Part 5 so much more, as it found a cheap way to profit off a revamping of a franchise that was popular, and it really hindered the success of future sequels. And it's unfortunately more disappointing here, as this film, Part 6, seems to be a lot of people's favorites, or near favorites. And Danny Steinman even almost returned as director here apparently, so thank fuck that didn't happen. But I love Part 6, so I'll give Jason Lives a 7.4 out of 10. And finally, at my number 1 spot, just beating out Jason Lives, is Friday the 13th, Part 4, the final chapter. And as hilarious as the name is now, with all that came after this sequel, I just personally feel that Part 4 truly encapsulates a lot of the best aspects of Friday the 13th. And I feel like they had some of the most fun with this setting and the Jason character. And it does have some of the more interesting kills, some of which came at unexpected moments. And Jason still looks absolutely terrifying with some of his better sequences. Plus it feels like a satisfying finale film. Even though, of course, it didn't end here, but still. And a powerful and brutal effort just left off on a fitting and dark note. It even has a couple extra characters that you can actually kind of give a shit about. Part 4 introduces Corey Feldman as Tommy Jarvis, and of course this actor was huge, especially as a child star in the 80s and 90s, so it did add some extra nostalgia points for me as well, plus his great performance in this film. I also rather enjoyed the Jarvis family as a whole, Tracy the mother, as well as Tommy's sister Trish, and of course their puppers Gordon. They were just a likable, endearing family, and I really actually wanted to root for them. And we open this film with Jason's body from Part 3 going to a morgue, and this creepy motherfucker named Axel is the doctor, coroner, medical examiner, whatever, and he is set to examine Jason's body as well as the bodies of some of the other victims from Part 3. And we are introduced to him by him making crude comments on a dead woman's body. And then we see him harass this other nurse that's on shift with him while he is watching women's aerobics on TV. Just imagine if this man had internet access. Wow. But anyways, this opener is fine. Both the nurse and the doctor, the actors who portray them, it's not the best acting job, to be honest with you. Because when they're trying to get nasty near Jason's body, one of Jason's hands kind of plops out from under the cover and touches Axel on the shoulder, leading to Axel giving his best dollar store impression of a Clark Griswold meltdown slash rant, and the nurse overreacts about as hilariously in her own way. But after a handsaw to the throat and a jab in the gut, we get to leave that behind. Similar to part 7, we have those few decent characters at one house, and then the bland death row teens next door at the other house not far away. And while this is my favorite film in the franchise, it still comes with my least favorite character in the franchise, Jimmy. I would almost rather see Shelly from part 3 live and appear in 2 more films than to see Jimmy ever again. Or even in this film. And one of the friends of the group, Ted, fucks with Jimmy over and over again about a breakup Jimmy had back home with a girl he couldn't close with. He calls him a dead fuck about 50 times, which is like a common quotable from this movie now. But he calls him that about 50 times and only stops because Jason makes a weird porno Ted is watching on a projector, 3D, with his knife. And Ted is awful as you can imagine, but I can't stand Jimmy. This constant, sad sack, wimpy ass, limp-tick personality. And I can be sympathetic with people who lack confidence. I get it. Trust me, I do. But this woe is me shit got old fast. Oh well, never found love. I guess I am a dead fuck. Shut the fuck up, Jimmy. Just shut up, man. You were my favorite machete to the face kill in this franchise, and the corkscrew in your hand was a nice touch too. Anyway. They also introduce a loner character, Rob Dyer, who is hunting down his sister's killer, who actually was Sandra from part 3. And one thing that did get kind of annoying with this franchise was they had this habit of introducing these different characters with time spent on their backstory, or they're at least trying to make them a love interest, but as soon as Jason appears the first time, they are killed off instantly, or at least incapacitated, and it really just makes you wonder, why take up all that time for all that build-up? And for one of the more infamous moments, they try and have a point to Rob dying so quickly, but the execution just lands in probably one of the most embarrassing ways. Director Joseph Zito meant to make this encounter more disturbing by basing Rob's final words off of a real phone call where a woman is calling police and she's frantically announcing that the attacker is killing her as it is happening. And in that scenario, that audio is haunting. And I've actually heard the audio before, I believe. But here, the delivery is the most awkward, hilarious thing ever. Rob just shouts the same thing out as that woman did while trying to fend off Jason. And Joseph Zito was hoping to have this come off in a similar fashion to that 911 call, except Rob is supposed to be viewed as this potential equal to Jason, physically with his size and anger and drive for vengeance. And the moment was supposed to make us feel more hopeless for the remaining characters, as his potential equal is taken out with ease. But we are not going to feel unsettled when a grown man we're supposed to take seriously is spending more of his last bit of energy high-pitched yelling about Jason killing him as it is happening, rather than trying harder to fight. We're just not going to feel bad for him or for any of the characters. I get being scared, but everything about how the scene was carried out was just so unnatural. I don't see hardly anyone reacting in quite the way he did. And hindsight is 2020, but I don't see how they didn't question this more when filming it. Even audience members at this time got a really good laugh out of it. But moving on to Ted White, at 58 years old at the time, he was the oldest to portray Jason, and honestly, he's one of my favorites. Fortunately, it took him a while to grow to appreciate this film and the fan base, and he seemed to have a terrible time on set. First off, calling Corey Feldman the meanest goddamn kid or something like that, despite complimenting him as an actor. But then him and Joseph Zito did not get along. Now, at one point, Ted White even refused to participate any further until the actress Judy Aronson got a break. And I can't remember the character's name she portrayed, but Judy Aronson played the actress who stripped down, had to get on the raft and go out in the middle of the lake. And don't get me wrong, that is a great scene. That jump scare, that Jason coming up and stabbing her from underneath the raft and grabbing her. It was a great addition, a great moment. One of the top ones in this film, I would say, but I do agree with Ted White that she should not have been out on that lake completely nude for as long as she was. Like, Zito really left her out there for a long time to get the shot that he wanted. But for one thing, the actors did do their own stunts, but on top of everything else, it was really fucking cold when they filmed this movie. Like, the movie wants you to think that it's this warm time of year. This is like the middle of the night, and it was freezing cold, and she is naked out on the cold water of a lake, and she was out there for a fucking minute. Like, hypothermia is a real concern here. So, no matter Ted White's controversial attitude towards a lot of other aspects of this experience, this was a really respectable stand by him that I have to stand by, and I'm happy that Zito eventually listened, even if it did take way too long. And they really did go for it once again with the window throwing by Jason, throwing a victim out of a window in slow motion. Now, the first one was kind of cool. It was a nice moment, and we hadn't seen this a crazy amount of times in this way quite yet. The second one was fine, but it was exactly the same essentially, so it's like, alright, let's take it easy. But by number 3, it was different, but it was just so random. And it wasn't a body being thrown through a window, it was the dog, Gordon, jumping through the window on his own in slow motion. The cool thing that was weird was that it didn't make sense for him to do it. I don't remember him specifically running from anything, and even if he did, I don't see a dog choosing a window most of the time. And also, this isn't the dog's fault, but the dog actually looked kind of happy from what I remembered, if I remember correctly. He just didn't like he was scared of anything, and they made it slow motion, like just a random additional slow motion scene of a dog jumping through a window. It made no sense. But I am happy that they stopped with the windows when they did this time. But despite my issues that I've discussed so far, most of them really are small for the most part, for what is still a highly entertaining home invasion, deep in the woods slasher with an iconic killer. And it feels like they truly had inspiration and really tried with most of the kills, the action, the suspense, the jump scares in places. It just feels like it's about as fun as a Friday the 13th film can be in its traditional environment. And Tom Savini does return here to help finish what he started, which again is funny as fuck now, but that gives us some unique effects as well. Probably the most notable being Jason getting the machete to his face, and then him falling on the floor and his face just sliding down the machete. That's a really cool effect. And while I mentioned before not wanting Tommy being the new killer, or at least not for the long term, I actually did like and buy into the finale with his character. The truly horrifying look he gave himself to distract Jason, and then him losing his temper and delivering those unrelenting blows, trying to finish Jason off when he was still moving, and then ending with that freeze frame of his cold stare he gives into the camera right before the credits roll. I actually do think that would have been a fine place to stop if the franchise had stopped here. And then even going to his sister Trish, she honestly was a great character. I actually really enjoyed her. I would have liked to have seen her in at least one other sequel, if not as the main character, at least a side character still trying to defeat Jason. I would have liked to see her come back. But, and I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but if you're going to take this final chapter that did so well and decide later to attempt a sequel, I still wish they had gone with just about anything else than to go with any idea of Danny Steinman's. Such a waste. And I get it. That fifth film, it's not all Danny Steinman's fault. He used his skills that he did have, even if it wasn't for horror. He made it work the best that he could and did win over some fans. But I get the studio was the biggest criminal here with really shitting on the quality of that film because they just did not give a fuck about making a decent film, and so why should he either? But just that whole part 5 just still pisses me off. But, anyways, can't dwell on the past too much. So, for part 4, it's an exciting, passionate effort, great shots of Jason, some more characters to root for and against, and also just a stellar intro to Tommy Jarvis. So I'll give part 4 a 7.8 out of 10. Well, holy shit, that was a lot. 11 films ranked for Friday the 13th, and no matter what our differences and opinions might be on our list for this film and how we rank them, I do hope this ranking was enjoyable to listen to. I had a lot of fun revisiting this franchise. Jason has definitely earned his place as a slasher icon, despite the many installments that were maybe a bit lackluster. And after this, I do feel like revisiting a lot of 80s films, horror, drama, comedy, action, whatever. But we'll get to that later. But let me know what your ranking list looks like. I'm again on Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and X at the moment. And I will rank other franchises down the road. If you have one that you'd like for me to rank, let me know what it is. It doesn't have to be horror. It absolutely can be, but it doesn't have to be. And later this year, probably around fall time, maybe in October, I do plan to release at least one more ranking video this year of a horror franchise, a very popular one. So look out for that down the road in the future this year. I'm not sure exactly when I'll start on that, but for right now, I have multiple reviews that I need to record and get out to you guys, so I am working on things still. So for anyone out there, thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on The Entertainment Room.